Yesterday, we went into detail on how Tiago Splitter can use the starting five and the new style that he can use them in. We talked about the roles, we talked about the balance that are there. But on today's episode, I actually want to talk about the Chicago Bulls bench. Because, yes, while Josh Giddey, Norman Powell, Matas Buzelis, Caleb Wilson, and Nic Claxton give the Chicago Bulls size, length, scoring, defense, and transition pressure in the starting lineup, I think the real question is what identity can Tiago Splitter build when this bench unit? And I think this bench is not built like a classic bench unit at all. There are a number of players that are going to have to prove themselves this year to fight into that rotation. I think Tre Jones gives them structure. Dailyn Swain gives them athletic upside. Then, of course, you have the swings in Noa Essengue and Leonard Miller and what they can bring. Zach Collins, pretty straightforward, and we know what Jalen Smith's role is, but how does it all fit together? That's what we're going to talk about on today's episode of Chicago Bulls Central. We're going to talk about that and how Matas Buzelis has gotten a great jump start to his offseason by playing overseas. We'll talk about all that plus more right after this. What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host here, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button. Trying to get to 50,000 subscribers. We've been seeing tremendous growth, and I know that's because the offseason has been exciting with the draft and the change of coach in front office, but we want to continue that upwards trend, right? We need to get to that 50,000 subscribers. I just want to do it for bragging, not just bragging rights, but because, hey, listen, we put in the work here. In exchange for that, I'll be giving you guys the best daily Chicago Bulls content that you can find on YouTube or in the podcast segment, and it's the best. But with that said, let's go ahead and get into it, man. So I want to talk about the bench today. We talked about the starting five, and I think the starting five has more identity and more fit and more kind of structure than we've had with our starting five in a long time. I'm really excited to see what this starting five can do. Not predicting the Bulls to win 40 games or anything like that, but just from a structure of playing basketball, getting to see guys like Matas Buzelis and Caleb Wilson develop in that structure. Also, I feel like slowly but surely, and I think this goes overlooked because a lot of people, they do like to hate on Josh Giddey, and at this point it is outward hate by some people. But slowly but surely, Bryson Graham has built a roster that really makes sense and can utilize Josh Giddey's skill set a lot. And I don't think that's not by happenstance. I think that the Bulls do know that they need to evaluate if they can build the right roster around Josh Giddey and if it makes sense with the tools that they have and stuff like that. And Josh Giddey has as much pressure as anybody else. Two, you have your lob threat in your center now, Nic Claxton. You have the scoring pressure and the off-ball player in Norman Powell who can score both on-ball, off-ball, those type of things. And then you got your young transition flyers with you in Matas Buzelis and Caleb Wilson in that starting lineup. So there's going to be a lot of pressure on what Josh Giddey can do as well, and a lot of eyes on that. And if the Bulls do look like a formidable offense in that, and we see some of the strategies that defenses employ to kind of get Josh Giddey out of the paint, if that ends up working, then, I think that that's going to be part of the evaluation of Josh Giddey. And I know that's a hot button topic in Bulls community right now, but that's a story for another day. We'll talk about that when we get into around training camp areas, when I'll get into the expectations for each player coming into the season, the biggest things for them. That's going to be one of the things we talk about, but look forward to that. A little future proof on the content there. But I want to talk about the bench. The way that I look at benches, right, in the NBA is a bench is meant to be a toolbox. Meaning that you can go in and pull out what you need depending on the matchup, depending on what starter may have a cold night or something like that. And it either is there to, sometimes you have a bench unit that's meant to keep up the style of the starting lineup, and sometimes you have a bench that's meant in there to be whether it's change of pace, whether it's change of defensive intensity, whether it's change of the offensive flow and more offensive firepower. There's a lot of different types of benches that you can build in the NBA. I think the best types of benches, the ones that really good teams do, is when they have a plethora of different weapons on that bench, and you can go in and pull out. That's kind of what the OKC Thunder have, right? Now, a lot of their identity is, of course, built on defense and transition and attacking the paint, but OKC slowly but surely built a bench where it's a toolbox, right? And I'm not in any way saying that the Bulls are anywhere close to having a toolbox like the OKC Thunder, but I do think that the bench identity is going to be built around a couple of things. One, pressure defense. I think we have defenders in there in Tre Jones, Dailyn Swain. Those guys are going to be really good defenders in this potentially. Also, Jalen Smith. Not that Jalen Smith is like an amazing defender. I do think sometimes people overgas Jalen Smith's defense, but he is a really good team defender. He does provide some rim protection. And if Zach Collins can ever stay healthy, right, he does provide some two-way play. Not an amazing defender, but a good system defender. So there is a version of this bench rotation that can put pressure on defense. And don't let Noa Essengue or Leonard Miller also continue what Leonard Miller showed last year. And Noa Essengue actually shows that he can at least be a defensive piece for this team. I think also this is going to be a transition pace bench, right? You can go into this one and pull out your transition pieces. The Noa Essengues, the Tre Jones can navigate that. Dailyn Swain's going to thrive in transition as well, so you can do that. And then the versatile forwards that the Bulls do have. This is where the NBA is really going. Versatile forwards that can do so much, right? And so the Bulls have 4 of those guys coming off the bench. You got Leonard Miller, who's a two-way forward. You got Noa Essengue, who projects to be a two-way forward long-term, right? But we'll see what he ends up doing there. And you got Jalen Smith as well, who can bring some offense with the shooting. In transition, he's pretty good as well in regards to that. And don't overlook that there are going to be some lineups where even Zach Collins, I think, lines up as forward out there with Nic Claxton, depending on where some of those bigger teams that we face off against. So there's a lot of different looks that this team could go to, right? Now, I think that one of the biggest questions about this bench is if Norman Powell has a off shooting night, do we have enough shooting coming off the bench? And as it stands right now, we don't. We just don't, right? So we don't have that bench score that is like, all right, Norman Powell's having a cold night. Or let's say that the defense is focusing in on Norman Powell and it's Matas and it's Josh who's having a cold night. We need to bring in another scorer there. We don't really have that. Now, Tre Jones can score, but he's not a shooter, right? Like we've seen that happen in regards to that one. So the half-court scoring is still going to be an issue for the Bulls, whether in the starting lineup or, well, the starting lineup should have decent half-court scoring, but there's still a question mark there. The bench, it does nothing to solve that, right? So I think that that's what is going to happen. And, there's going to be likely some time where Tiago Splitter staggers one of Norman Powell, Josh Giddey, or Matas Buzelis with that bench unit to provide a little bit more scoring there. And that's perfectly fine. Again, that's balance on a team. This isn't hockey. You're not bringing in your total bench. You're pulling out your starters completely. Like, that's not what you're doing here. So, that's fine. You just have to stagger who's going to be the stagger guy. And that was a question that we've been asking for years. It was with Kobe sometimes, right? In past. It was DeMar DeRozan in the past sometimes. Who's going to be that, right? And that's what we're going to have. You're not going to see, I think, a lot of rotations where it's just 5 reserves, 5 bench players out there together. You're going to see some of that, right? That's kind of naturally happens in basketball. But I do think you're going to see 1 or 2 guys being staggered out there. So the Bulls have bodies. The question is how Tiago Splitter turns that into a real rotation, which that gives us to the roles here, right? Now, somebody was on yesterday's episode, like, no player has a single role on a team. If you don't understand, dumbass, I'm saying that that's how they're mainly going to be used. It doesn't mean that that's exclusive to how they're going to be used, but let's talk about it. I look at the stabilizers on this team. I think there are 2 major stabilizers on this bench unit. Tre Jones, Dailyn Swain. And I say that because of their defense. Right now, I think Dailyn Swain, if he does not earn that as a rookie, other stabilizers that you can look at is Jalen Smith. You can look at Jalen Smith's definitely going to be somebody that could be a stabilizer. Leonard Miller has the potential to be a stabilizer too. Again, I know that Leonard Miller finished the season extremely strong last year, but I do like to put it in reality. The fact is that a lot of that was against team second units, but he did look really good when he was out there with Josh Giddey and Matas Buzelis. I'm just not ready to put a lot on Leonard Miller yet, right? He's going to have to show it. And Dailyn Swain is too, for that matter, right? So anybody can prove themselves to be a stabilizer. A lot is going to be determined in training camp. But I do think Tre Jones brings structure to the bench, right? He brings the stabilizer. We don't have a lot of people that can create their own shot. So Josh Giddey and Tre Jones' ability to facilitate is going to be really important, whether with the bench unit or with starters. And that's the thing. Tre Jones is going to be the first guard off the bench, right? And that's going to be probably for the remainder of the season, unless we end up trading him. But his job is to run the offense, calm down the players that if they get a little bit out of hand and stuff like that, get the ball to the players that get downhill, find Jalen Smith on the pick and pops. Like, Tre Jones is going to have a really important role on this team. Dailyn Swain is a swing piece on this team because while Dailyn Swain is a rookie, he probably has the best on-ball defense other than Tre Jones on this team. I know Isaac Okoro has the reputation of being a defender, but when you go and look at, not to say that he's been terrible, but it hasn't really been that to where it separates himself. If Dailyn Swain comes in here and proves that his defense can make an impact early on, I can see him being in the rotation ahead of Isaac Okoro, and that's what a lot of Bulls fans would want to see regardless of that. So Dailyn Swain is a swing piece because I do think he could begin as a reserve in the season. He's going to be pushing for closing minutes at times this season. When you look at how he can as far as isolation scoring, he does fit that mold of a guy that can go and get you a bucket. It's not going to be three-pointers, but he can go and get you a bucket. And if that's something that develops over the course of the season, the same way we saw happen with like Stephen Castle and Harper on the San Antonio Spurs, if he starts developing that as the season goes on, by the end of the season, I can see Dailyn Swain absolutely earning a closing role on the Chicago Bulls team, right? But his role early on is going to be to defend, to slash, to run, to cut, attack closeouts, and create a little with the second unit. We don't have a scorer on the second unit. Dailyn Swain is the closest thing that we have to a pure scorer on the second unit. He's just not going to do it exclusively with threes. His ability to create in isolation and in the mid-range, I could see Tiago Splitter falling in love with that. He just has to show he can do it consistently at the NBA level. Shooting is going to be a concern, and that's just going to be a concern all over this bench unit unless Jalen has a hot season shooting from three. But I do think Tre gives the Chicago Bulls bench a brain, and I don't mean that to be disrespectful to the other players. I just mean he's such a high-level IQ basketball player, he's going to be there. Swain has a potentially bring some bench juice right away, and we've seen rookies be able to do that when they're not thrust into having to be starters right away. And I think that's going to be something that definitely stands out into regards to that. The next thing, you have your defensive wings and bigs. Jalen Smith, Leonard Miller, Noa Essengue can fit into this as well. Isaac Okoro could. I know that a lot of Bulls fans aren't necessarily high on Isaac Okoro. I understand that. But looking at Tiago Splitter, how he used veteran defenders like Drew Holiday, Matas Buzelis, stuff like that, like I can see him using guys, or Tamari Kamara, I can see him using Isaac Okoro, a guy like that. Isaac Okoro, if he is going to get a role on this team, his role is clear. Defend, run, cut, hit corner threes. If Isaac Okoro does that consistently, which is still a question, he's going to have a role on this team, period. And he can guard the bench scorers really good. Like I said, he's not really that guy that, he talked about coming in the last season where I'm going to go shut down the other team's best perimeter defender. He's not that. But I do think he can slow some down, right, in some specific matchups, and take that for what you will. I do think Leonard Miller also, like I said earlier, he's going to be in an interesting spot in this rotation because I can see him I can even see him maybe even being the first forward off the bench in certain games. Like Leonard Miller has tons of potential. He's just going to have to show it consistently with this coach in this system, and we'll see. He has shown himself to be somebody that's worth investing development minutes in. Let's just see if that ends up turning into something you can bet on consistently for this team. If it does, great, right? But I do think like Leonard Miller's in a prove it. And there are a lot of people that are in a prove it year. Leonard Miller's in it. Noa Essengue, if he can prove anything this season. To certain degrees, Isaac Okoro as well. I know people are going to Rob Dillingham. I think Rob Dillingham is another player that you can look at. Like if Rob, and you guys know I'm not the highest on Rob Dillingham, but I'm also not going to, like I said, I want to see everybody on this Bulls team, thrive, right? I'm not Matt Peck. I'm not going to hate on a player on my team just because I may have some doubts about him. I'm still going to use my basketball intellect and look at a player and say, listen, Rob Dillingham has the chance to be a wild card on this bench. And by that, I mean this. He is the most natural on paper shot creator on this bench unit, other than Dailyn Swain, right? And I think with that, it could give him a path to minutes. Now, I think that Rob Dillingham, not even just the size aspect, he hasn't shown the ability to get the shot off consistently against NBA defenders. But if he does that, and his passing, I was extremely impressed with Rob Dillingham's passing last year. If Rob's shot becomes if he figures out how to consistently get that shot off in the NBA level, he does have a path to this. Now, he has the toughest defensive path because he can't guard anything. But if Rob Dillingham actually does find a way for the facilitating and the scoring to be to make an impact with that off the Bulls bench, Rob Dillingham could definitely be a wild card on this Bulls bench. And I'm going to say that again as somebody who's not even the biggest Rob Dillingham fan, but I'm not going to ignore the potential there. And we'll see how Tiago Splitter and this team, he could be that spark plug off the bench. I said earlier, this Bulls team doesn't have a true spark plug scorer off the bench. The closest thing that we have to that could be Rob Dillingham, but he's going to have to show that he can do it. He can be a change of pace ball handler. He can be a late in shot clock creator as well. and he can be a microwave at times. Now, that's going to be some times where he's going to fail. There's going to be some times where he can thrive. The goal for Rob Dillingham this season is to make the thrive minutes more than the struggle minutes. And we'll see if he can end up doing that. And Zach Collins also has a pretty straightforward role on this bench. He's the matchup big. He's there to give, to come in there, play his role, coming back on a 2-year, $17 million deal. This is a guy he's not as clean of a spacing fit as Jalen Smith, but he is a guy that he's stronger. He sets screens hard. He's a really good passer from the elbows. He plays through contact. Like Zach Collins, if he can stay healthy, has a chance to be one of those bench bigs that teams love because he does play two-way basketball. It just comes down to how consistently can he be on the basketball court. If he can be consistent on the basketball court, that's there. So Jalen Smith as well is that backup big. Now, I'm saying big because I think he's going to play more power forward than center. But if Zach Collins is injured a lot, he's going to have to be forced to play center based off the roster that we have right now. And so Jalen brings some shooting. He brings some rim protection. He brings a little bit of that. He doesn't really have the back-to-the-basket moves. Like, I wouldn't even call Zach Collins the most back-to-the-basket move center, but he does have more than Jalen Smith. But Jalen can thrive off putbacks. He can thrive off lobs. He can do that type of style, the run and gun, not run and gun. I don't want us to do run and gun, but the more faster in transition, he can do that as well. So basically what I say to bring all that together, right? To all that together with this is that this bench has a lot of potential. It really and how players play and how they perform consistently. If they do, Tiago Splitter can go deep into the bench. Most teams have a 10-man rotation. We know the starting five: Giddey, Powell, Matas, Caleb, Claxton. The bench unit: Tre Jones, definitely going to be in there as well. Jalen Smith, Zach Collins, probably definitely going to be in there because of veteranship. But then when you look at the wild cards in that, Dailyn Swain, if he becomes a scorer and can be that late game shot creator, even though it's not going to be a lot of three-point shots, but don't sleep on him. He shot 34% from three. Leonard Miller has tons of potential on this team as well. And then you have Noa Essengue and Rob Dillingham that have to show and prove that they can be in that rotation. And if they do, great. This has a lot of different kind of looks. When you look at the best bench lineups, right? Safe bench unit: Tre Jones, Dailyn Smith, Leonard Miller that you can go to, Jalen Smith, and then Zach Collins. That's your safe bench unit, in my personal opinion. That bench unit brings you defense. You can run. It has structure. The concern, of course, becomes half-court scoring. Then you can look at the offensive bench unit where you can run if his scoring works. And again, keep in mind, I'm putting him in this lineup, and I'm not even a big fan. A Rob Dillingham, Norman Powell, like Matas Buzelis, Caleb Wilson, and Jalen Smith, as an offensive bench match between bench and starters, like there's something that you can look at with that one, man. And I'd say like that could be, again, if Rob Dillingham works out. I don't have the biggest faith, but if he does, man, he can really change some of the lineups with this team. And then, of course, you have your defensive pressure bench unit: Tre Jones, Dailyn Swain, bringing in Leonard Miller if he ends up working out, right? Like, you have that to pair along with Caleb Wilson and Nic Claxton. That's a defensive pressure that can stop a lot of teams in pick and roll and stuff like that. Again, this is at the top level, depending on what they do and how they develop. So look at that part of it. But all I can say is this, like, to bring it all home, to close this segment out, and it's gone most of the show now. We're almost at 18 minutes into the show. We've gone just talking about this bench unit, but that is why I'm excited. Again, not saying that it's going to be one of the best bench units in basketball, but I think that this bench unit, while it's not built like a classic bench unit, it's built like a pressure bench. There's a lot of different pressure and types of pressure that you can put on opposing teams with this bench. The biggest question is if Tiago Splitter has the bodies. It's whether or not he can organize the bodies and how much these players really step up and into these roles and show, hey, play us. We got something for you. And let's see what happens with that one. But all right, with that, let's move into the next segment. Matas Buzelis and what he's done in the summer so far, man. He's played some of the qualifiers, but he had his first real international debut, and he made a really solid outing with Lithuania. Now, it wasn't great, right? Like, as far as, like, you're not going to look at the stat sheet and be wild, but again, international basketball, you're not seeing a lot of the 20, 30-point games. In 23 minutes against Great Britain, he had 12 points. He went 5 of 12 shooting as well, with an offensive board, an assist, and a block. He showed the athleticism. He showed the transition finishing. He even played really solid defense and played with energy. The highlight came on a dunk and a defensive play that showed exactly how we want Matas Buzelis to play for the Chicago Bulls this year. You look at the next matchup against Italy, it gives them another chance to continue to build momentum. And I'll say this, like, with Summer League right around the corner, and Caleb Wilson, Dailyn Swain, Noa Essengue playing in Summer League, which is going to be really fun to see, Matas is really using this offseason. That's why I was excited about him playing with Lithuania, because I think it really gives him an opportunity to get a jump start. This is like training camp before training camp. And for those that have been former athletes, you understand, right? Like playing a series of pickup ball before you get your season starts. Like, it's stuff like that. And this is really where Matas really can hit into that. It's going into year 3. That developmental leap that a lot of Bulls fans want to see from him. He has an opportunity to jumpstart that because, and he's always been a gym rat, right? But it's different from being in the gym, working against trainers and stuff like that, than being in actual meaningful competition. And I know not everybody's the biggest international fan, and that's perfectly fine, but this is meaningful competition where he's going in, playing in this game, having a chance to really, wow and show some things. And I think he's played pretty damn good so far. So look out for Matas Buzelis. If Matas makes a leap this year, and comes into training camp with a different mindset and mentality, and is in basically, it usually takes a team kind of 20 to 25 games into the season before everybody's kind of ramped up all on the same page. Matas Buzelis could very well come into training camp already kind of at that spot to start off with. And I think that provides some real big excitement for this team. Last time before we get out of here, though, both Collin Sexton and Anthony Simons have signed with new teams. Collin Sexton went to the Lakers. Anthony Simons went to the 76ers, and there are some Bulls fans that hope that one of these guys can help fill out that final spot on the bench. Well, that's now not going to happen. And it does seem like right now that Bryson Graham is content kind of waiting until kind of the dust settles in free agency, and what veterans and like I said, it could end up being a Bruce Brown, it could be a Gary Trent Jr., what veterans have not found their way on the team. You then add somebody with experience that can help, stabilize that bench. That's not going to get a lot of minutes projectively, but you can call on when you do need minutes from them. And that's if they even fill the final roster spot. There's a world in which the Bulls go into the season with that final roster spot open. That way they can take more players back in a trade or something like that if they need be. So there's that opportunity there as well. So I just wanted to kind of close out the show on that because I know that's been a big topic that people have brought up in the comments for the last couple of days is like, oh, can we get Simons back? Can we get Collin Sexton back? And even though Collin Sexton signed a couple of days ago with the Lakers, and I didn't really cover it on the episode then, Sexton, Simons, they're now gone. And we get to see what the rest of this team how Bryson Graham's going to fill out that last roster spot. But like I said, do not be surprised if that final roster spot remains open, and we'll just see what happens in regards to that. But that's going to do it for today's show, man. I want to thank you guys for who all tuned in. I want to hear your thoughts down below. How do you think this bench unit can work out for the Chicago Bulls? Do you agree with my mindset on the toolbox mentality that you have this bench unit that theoretically you can go out and pull in a lot of kind of different types of tools, even though we don't have shooting isn't one of those tools, but you have scoring in several different areas. Who do you think on this bench could shine? Do you think that a Rob Dillingham really has an opportunity this year to step up and show himself to be that scoring punch off the bench? Let me know what you guys think on that part down below. But it's up to Tiago Splitter to organize those pieces. And for what I've seen, Tiago Splitter is going to be really good at figuring out which guys to go to on any given night. They just got to be ready. Let me hear your thoughts on that one down below. Make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel as well. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode or a live stream. You can follow us at Bull Central Pod on every social media platform. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. And lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the #1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that is thanks to you, lovely and beautiful people. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See you right if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation